Okay. We're going to have Q&A with the last 3 or 4 speakers. We can include, this is on, right? We can include Phil Tanimoto and John, Didi, and Rich. Might as well. And Jim, if you want. Jim, everybody remember what Jim said? The water issue, seriously, the water issue is enormous in the climate connection. So that's on. So that's part of the picture. It's a lot of things to cover, but please ask what questions you might have. Anybody want to start? Yeah, get a mic to him.
I'll just shout.
No, don't shout.
Don't shout. Because we're recording. I'm curious to know if you all are aware of anything you all don't agree about.
Anything that we don't agree about. Not that I'm aware of.
I'm very impressed by what I've heard about cattle and mob grazing and the potential for developing the land and better, healthier beef. But I still have heard an awful lot about methane as a production of cattle. And I didn't hear anything about that today. Is there some way that what you're doing is controlling for the methane?
Is this on?
Yeah.
The methane is an issue. The methane does exist in cattle. Most of the studies have been done on cattle in feedlots or cattle in a concrete stall measuring the methane emissions. We're in a biological system where as the methane gets created, one of the things that does happen is methanogenic bacteria arrive and start dealing with that methane. So there is some methane. We can't say there's no methane. But the system, totally puts down so much more carbon and counteracts the impact of a smaller amount of methane. That's a quick, you can go on our website and read some more about it. Lynn?
I just wanted to add that there's a good article in a peer-reviewed scientific journal on that topic by Richard T. Explaining that there's a net climate benefit to raising grass-fed.
And just a few other thoughts about the methane. One is that cows are getting a lot of blame for methane, but zebras and every other grazing animal, whether they're wild or domesticated, produces methane because it's just part of their digestive system. So when we had huge herds of buffalo or the caribou, et cetera, roaming the grasslands, it's highly unlikely that our cattle production now, especially in the grass-fed end of the sector, is creating more methane than those were. People who've looked into the research have found that these big spikes in methane have come from the methane leaks from fracking and from other methane piping that we're now seeing now that they can do some visioning, some visualizing of it, and that this whole focus on cattle is probably an industry way of shifting the blame. So,
Yeah, one of the big questions is the two methodologies of industrial production and grass production are just so different. I mean, even if you take a kernel of corn and you look at the net energy in that kernel of corn from the energy that was put in to create it, you start there with a real problem. And then you feed it to an animal and but all those what they call externalities are never measured in the industrial system.
I just want to throw in a little word about methane. If you look at the methane curves for the past 600,000 years ago, they go, let's see, you're on that side. Okay, they go like this. And that's the Industrial Revolution, particularly in the past 100 years. Before that, they were level for hundreds of thousands of years. They're part of the system. As Rich said, the system has worked a lot of this out.
Isn't the methane exacerbated by the corn bed because that's uncharacteristic for the cattle's digestive system? Yeah. Right. So it doesn't eliminate it, but we've made it worse with the corn.
Right. It's just like E. coli. E. coli is rampant in our food system because in the gut of the bovine, when you feed grain, you create acidosis. So one of the biggest inputs on the feedlot is baking soda, attempting to buffer the rumen so that digestion can happen. So you have this acid environment, you put E. coli in there, and what do you get? Acid-resistant E. coli. Cornell's done the study. If you took the cattle off the feedlot and put them on hay for the last 10 days, you virtually eliminate acid-resistant E. coli. But you can't say there's no E. coli in grass-fed beef because it's a naturally occurring phenomenon. But, you know.
It's also been observed that methanotrophic bacteria that metabolize methane are often found at the ground level, close to where cattle are grazing, unless the cattle are unfortunate enough to be grazing on concrete. Then, but you know, there is an opportunity in the system for bacteria to metabolize that methane in many cases, and it's right there where it's produced from the belching.
Is this all more methane? No more methane. Okay, Jim wanted.
I just say it's bigger than that. The methanotrophs, I mean, what the soils used to do, the soils could breathe. And when they breathed, if there was any methane at all in the air, it would go through the ground, and it's a huge fuel for microbes in the soil. If you've got soils that don't breathe, you might create methane, but that's really hard to do. That takes a lot of energy. But methane's a fuel for microbes, and breathing soils takes that away. We need more breathing soils if we think about this holistically. So,
any questions about
It's easy
raising?
to skew results from data if you come at it from the wrong point of view. So, more questions?
I had a question. As a fisheries biologist working in Maine, which is soon to become maybe the breadbasket of New England because of the soils and so on, we're having a lot of discussions with the new farmers who are emerging. So as those soils are coming back into productivity, we're saying, please don't make the same mistakes as we did in the 1800s and get the cows in the streams and so on. And I just want to reinforce that's I guess good fences make good neighbors, and whether it's the rainforest that you're attempting to keep agriculture away from in order to protect the ecological gem. The same is true in New England, that there are these ecological gems that we just need to stay away from, and these tiniest little streams are the most productive parts of the watershed. So that's a stream the size of your palm, which are the fronds of the watershed. So you think about, it's really important to be thinking not that we make the same mistakes of the past.
Anybody want to comment?
Yeah, I would just respond to that. I didn't want to in any way say that what they were doing in the 1830s was perfect, for the reasons you say. But what's interesting about the water and the interaction of the ruminants, a lot of people have this image the cattle just live there. And if you have them live in the stream, you got a real problem. Now, if you had them just walk through it once every 6 months, you have a very different scenario. And that's what we're trying to, optimize that motion in interaction. But agreed, keep the nutrients out of the water.
I just have I have something brief to say. I want to thank John Carroll for bringing up the price on carbon. And I have no idea what's going on at the federal level, but it's come to my attention recently that in Massachusetts, Senator Mike Barrett, I believe it is, he's from our district, is sponsoring a bill to put a price on carbon. And from what I've heard, the Massachusetts legislator is pulling a lot of shenanigans. We have a very liberal Senate, and we have a not so liberal House of Representatives. And the normal course for bills is to go before the Senate, where it would have a good chance of passing. But apparently, because of whatever they're doing, they've decided to put it to the House of Representatives first, where it's likely to die. So I think I just wanted to ask that everyone here consider calling their representatives, their state representatives, and asking them to vote in favor of this bill.
It's also important to line up the business, thank you. It's also important to line up the business interests that have something to gain from putting a tax on carbon, because they will lobby with you against those who perceive they're receiving a loss as a result of it. So get the business community into it, because there's a lot of gainers in that.
I have a question about Massachusetts agricultural land, because we've lost so much agricultural land to development, to suburban development and so forth. And I'm wondering, what mechanism you think is going to take place in order to expand agricultural land here in Massachusetts?
Well, that's a very good question. One of the interesting things is, and I get myself in trouble sometimes with Massachusetts agriculture, I say dairy is dead. Well, dairy's not dead, but dairy has moved. So if you look at the statistics, the main crop that we grow in Massachusetts, aside from plants for landscaping, is hay. So hay is essentially, you used to be a dairy farmer, you sold the cows because you can't make any money. Now you make hay for a living. You sell the hay to some horse person in the city. The manure goes in a dumpster. So that haying is is really a mining operation. So there's lots of land that's being hayed that could go back. But the other question, and we actually are, our group is organized a seminar in the fall at Harvard Forest to speak specifically to the groups that have captured land, that's the way I say it. You know, the trustees, the Nature Conservancy, the town, the land trust, who have basically taken it out of development, but then, we like to suggest another tool for management is the grazing. A lot of the tools used now are fire and poison, to control, or a bush hog, somebody with a tractor and a bush hog to go and keep it open. And we like to suggest, we'll almost pay you to come and run our cattle on it. but the state and conservation organizations own big chunks of land, and that does need to change.
Okay, we'll do one more question. You've been chomping at the bit.
Actually, I have two thoughts, both of them quick. One is for the beef development. I have a friend, Deborah Tropp, who works in the USDA. She's done a lot for farmers markets and making them more, spreading them around, making them at places like on the highway stops. And I suspect she might be a useful person for discussing how to develop beef locally. Deborah Tropp, I can give you her contact information. And in terms of cloud forest protection, are you aware of the work of Health and Harmony with by Canary Webb in Borneo, where? No, okay, they're doing some very interesting work. She was, as a doctor, she realized that a lot of the deforestation was being caused by people doing timbering because to pay for health care. And she has set up clinics in Borneo which exchange health care for reforestation and for the trained people actually in reforestation. And they do a lot of other work. I can give you the contact information for that too. But, yeah.
Well, thank you very much.